Bread dough is very simple to make. The 4 essential ingredients are flour, salt, yeast, which is called baker's yeast, and water. Here I have 500 grams of flour. I'm going to add 10 grams of salt, yeast, the baker's yeast. Now this might sound strange, but the baker's yeast is a fungus, an anaerobic fungus that lives without air. Air can actually destroy it, so don't leave it out too long so as not to harm the yeast. Next we add the water, which should be heated to a temperature of 25 to 30 degrees Celsius. Why? Because the heat will activate the yeast and favor rising. The amount of water to be added varies. For 500 grams of flour, you will add anywhere from 250 grams to 300 grams of water. Now we use our hand to knead the dough. This is the term we use to describe mixing the ingredients, really with the fingertips, like this. Right now it's still pretty firm. We want the dough to be more liquid. It's the hand of the baker, your hand in this case, that will determine the consistency of the dough. I'm adding a little more water. For about 5 minutes, you're going to knead it like this. I cover it with a dish towel and let it rest for about an hour and a half at room temperature. Let's see what this bread dough looks like. Remove the dish towel. Here you see that the dough rose. Now we deflate the dough by forming a ball like this. Already it sticks less because the dough worked and now has a better consistency. We let it rest again. Making bread is just a question of time, and love, of course. Let it rest for another hour. So 1 hour later, my dough rose again. We're going to prepare it for shaping, which means we will give it the form we want before baking. I simply dust my work surface with flour. Dusting means lightly sprinkling the flour over the work area. I take the dough and place it on the work surface. Remember that the dough has just rested for about 2.5 hours. During this time, the dough has developed its aromas and flavors. We'll make small rounds or rolls. Homemade rolls are really nice. We use about 50 grams or 60 grams of dough per roll. We take a piece of cut dough and make a ball. To make a ball, you fold the dough like this. Next, you put your thumb in the middle of the dough and with your 3 fingers gently fold the dough over your thumb. Keep turning the bread and folding all sides of the dough over the center. It may be sticky, so don't hesitate to add a little more flour on your fingers. And we keep turning like this. Once the dough is compact, I take a little more flour in the palm of my hand and roll it like this to form a ball. Put the ball on a baking sheet covered with wax paper. Now we have the rest of the dough to shape. We can make them into rolls, or why not into little baguettes. In order to do this, we stretch the dough lengthwise and then fold it in half like this. Make sure you're working gently with your fingertips. Then we roll the dough so it's more compact. The next step is a little more difficult. Put your thumb in the middle of the baguette, and with the palm of your hand, you pull the dough down over your thumb to seal or close the baguette. We can see clearly the form of a baguette where the 2 sides have been sealed. The seam should be placed face down on the baking sheet. If I place the seam side up, the baguette will open or split during baking and we won't have good-looking bread. Now that we have finished shaping the rolls on the baguette, we need to spray the dough with water. Why? So as to avoid the dough from drying out and forming a thin shell on the surface, which results from contact with air. Allow the dough to rise yet again for about 40 minutes. Our bread has risen, which means that it has sufficiently grown and can be put in the oven. We know the bread is ready because we gave it enough time to rest, but also when we touch it lightly, the dough springs back, retaining its shape. Just before cooking the bread, we moisten the dough by spraying it with water. Don't be afraid to wet the bread. Why? So that it will have a nice shine when it comes out of the oven. Finally, we scar the bread, a baker's term, which means cutting a motif onto the surface of the dough which produces a design on the baked bread. I'm going to use scissors to do this. You make different designs. The temperature of the oven should be at 240 degrees Celsius and preheated before you put the bread in. Also, before closing the oven door, spray more water into the oven, which will create some humidity. Close the oven and let it bake for about 25 minutes. And 25 minutes later, our bread is done. Be careful, the oven is very hot, so use an oven mitt or a dish towel to remove the baking sheet. Take a look at our bread. Obviously, it does not look exactly the same as bakery bread because the baker's oven is different from ours and specific to making bread. At least we have the privilege of saying that the bread is homemade.